Hi, everybody. This is Tracy Starkworth with Thrive Meetings and Events and Eating at a Meeting podcast and live broadcast. I am so excited. Thank you for being here today. With me, I have my friend Margaret Clegg from MI Gluten Free Gal.
Hi.
She and I, we met at the Fab Blog Con conference a couple of years ago, and we follow each other on social media and stuff. And I'm so excited to have you here to talk about what food safety means to people, to individuals that have celiac disease. So before we get started, tell everybody a little bit about what you do, and then let's dive into what is celiac so people can really get to know what it means.
Sure. So again, my name is Margaret Clegg. I live here in Michigan. That's what the MI stands for. It's like a play on words. So I have been living with celiac disease for 19 years. And my dad had it and my grandmother had it. So it is genetic. So I always tell people if there's someone in your family that has celiac disease, they need to get tested, even if they think they don't have symptoms, because you can have silent celiac disease. So I have a website called MI Gluten Free Gal. I share recipes. A lot of times I'll write informational articles sometimes because I see something, it's like that somebody's wrong on the internet. So then I have to write something about it. So I try to be informative, and especially on my Facebook page, I try to think of it as almost like your daily news. Like at 7 a.m, I try to share something on my Facebook that's news related, that we, when we learn more, when we know better, we do better. Right. So, and then share recipes, not just my own, but everybody, ones from other people as well, because obviously I'm not going to know how to cook everything. And there are other dietary restrictions that people have, like dairy-free or egg-free, or they're keto or whatever, which is not my wheelhouse, but it may be something that my followers need. So I try to be as informative as possible. I have a degree in education, so sometimes I feel like I write my recipes and articles kind of like a research paper. Like I'm used to doing all that writing in college. So it's like information heavy sometimes, but I hope I try to keep it light and informative.
Well, thank you for all that you do. I mean, it is a learning experience, because when you first get diagnosed with celiac disease, and sometimes the doctor just says, "Oh, by the way, you've got celiac," and then you have a nice life, and you walk up and you're like, what does this mean? Right? It changes your life.
Yeah, I actually had a follower that told me that their doctor just said, "Oh, go look it up on the internet," which is so that's so malpractice. It's not even crazy. That's just nuts. So you've had it for 20 years, but tell everybody what celiac is, and then what that experience was for you when you got diagnosed 20 years ago. Right. So celiac disease is an autoimmune disease. It's important to tell people it's autoimmune disease. It's not a food allergy. It's a different reaction in the body. We talk about there's celiac disease, there's wheat allergy. They're very different things, and we need to make sure we talk about them accurately so we get treated accurately if we get sick. So it's an autoimmune disease that your body attacks itself when you eat gluten, which is found in wheat, rye, and barley. And we say sometimes oats, that's a cross-contact issue. That's a whole other story, but no wheat, no rye, no barley, no einkorn, if you've seen one of my recent posts on Instagram. So what it does is it damages the lining of your intestines. You have these finger-like projections in your intestines called villi, and what that do, it absorbs the nutrients from your food. So what happens then when you have celiac disease, especially undiagnosed celiac disease, and you eat gluten, your body can no longer absorb the calcium, the vitamin D, the iron, anything from your food, and you become malnourished. And you can even be overweight and malnourished. It's an important distinction, because for too long, doctors thought, "Oh, you're skinny, you can't possibly have it." I mean, you're overweight, you can't possibly have it, which we've proven now is untrue. So because, and I tell people your body is like a car, like it needs all of those, vitamins and minerals to function properly. And when it's not absorbing them, your body systems start to go haywire. You have anemia, you have osteoporosis, you have migraines, you have infertility, all sorts of health issues. There are over 200 associated symptoms that go along with celiac disease. So when I got diagnosed, I was in college and I was not feeling well. I had a great PA, probably one of the best doctors I've ever had in my life, was a physician's assistant. And she noticed I was pale. She noticed my iron was low. And she's like, "Let's do some further testing." So I got sent to a hematologist, which is a doctor that he's a blood doctor, hemo. And they did a bunch of testing with no answers because he was looking for just blood disorders. He wasn't thinking about celiac at that time. So that was right before I did my student teaching, came home. And my mom worked at Ingham Medical, which is a hospital in the Lansing area. Now it's called McLaren. And so she took me to a gastroenterologist and said, oh, yeah, by the way, her dad has celiac sprue, which is celiac disease. Which I was like, what do you mean dad has this disease? Because he never followed the diet at the time. Like I didn't know anything. So it was a big shock. And I was doing my student teaching when I got my diagnosis, which is, if you know anything about student teaching, you're basically a free employee. Like you don't get paid when you do student teaching. And it's like you're teaching, but you get no payment. And so I was living with my mom and having to eat what she made, which wasn't always gluten-free. So you just do the best you can. And it wasn't until, and I didn't take it super seriously. Like I tell people, this is on I think it's on my blog post about my celiac story. Like I remember like our wedding cake when I got married was even a regular wedding cake. I ate regular wedding cake because I didn't have people that had truly supported me in the past to understand how serious it was. And I remember after we got married, we moved into Swartz Creek, which is about 10, 15 minutes from where we live now, and watching a piece on the Today Show about how it can lead to infertility. I mean, that was like that was like really shook me. I'm like, I want to be able to have kids. Now, even though my doctor already told me that if you don't change your diet, you could get cancer, that didn't faze me, but tell me I couldn't have kids. And I was like, oh, well, I better take this seriously. And so, so I did, and I made my dad take it seriously as well, and he really was better about following the diet, which, we had a lot of bonding moments about stuff like that. Like, did you try this yet or try that yet? So, yeah, he was my cheerleader.
Well, that's good, and you helped him in the end as well.
Yes,
and it's a big lifestyle change.
It is.
So one of the questions that I love to ask is, what does safe and inclusive food and beverage experience mean to you? Coming from a person with celiac disease, explain that to the listeners.
Yeah, so especially because you often talk about meetings and events, like if you're a person planning an event, a large event, like make sure that's one of the questions on your application form. If there's going to be food there, do you have any dietary restrictions? So that already tells me that you're at least somewhat thinking about it.
Right.
I was the head kitchen coordinator for a gluten-free kids camp. And what I did when we had, everything was gluten-free, but in addition, we had kids that couldn't have eggs or dairy. We had kids that couldn't have sugar or grains. So I made sure to call each and every parent of kids who had additional restrictions and said, okay, tell me what I can do to best serve your child. So I understand in a larger event, they may not be able to call everybody, but at least an email to say, hey, like, I see that you have this issue. Tell me more about how we can help you. And, or say, oh, I see that you're gluten-free. These are the protocols we take to make sure that something is gluten-free when it reaches you. Like we cook all pasta in clean water. We change our gloves. We only cook gluten-free orders in a clean pan. Those sort of things that you tell me you can go above and beyond. And, for like a restaurant, like one big thing that irks me is you'll have restaurants and they'll say, oh, we have a gluten-free menu, but they won't put it on their website. And they're not proud about it. Like they hide it. And I'm like, listen, if you can't be proud that you're willing to take the steps to meet somebody else's dietary restrictions, then I don't need to eat there. And I understand people like, oh, well, then we'll get flack because we offer a gluten-free diet. And I get it. There are, fad dieters out there. But if you're not, I have this post on my Instagram, like, dear bakers, if your product isn't safe for those with celiac, then it's not gluten-free. So either be proud that you're willing to take these steps to help the people that need it, or just don't do it at all. So yeah, and then I will tell you, like, there are lots of events there that I would prefer not to go to if they're not going to meet my needs. So that's something that event planners need to be thinking of. There are people that just won't come if you're not going to accommodate them.
I really like the idea, and that you said, is that if you're not proud of what you're going to serve, whether it's gluten-free or allergy-free or vegan,
right.
why even bother? I mean, you should be proud of what you're producing and want to get those customers to come into your restaurant or to come to your event. I think it's owning, not only do you as the celiac person need to own your diet, your diet, your disease, right? But the people who are making the food for you should own it as well. I think it's their responsibility, food safety responsibility.
I know a dedicated gluten-free restaurant that doesn't aggressively promote the fact that they're entirely gluten-free because they don't want the shame. They don't want the backlash for people to say, oh, and because people always say, oh, that's gluten-free, it tastes disgusting. Like they don't want people to not come to their restaurant, which I get. And it's interesting, I talked about this recently on my social media. Like part of that issue is we as gluten-free eaters need to quit complaining so vocally all the time if something doesn't taste good, because that's all people hear then. Like there are tons of amazing gluten-free products. And I tell people, like, I can eat dairy, but I like to try dairy-free cheese to compare, because I can't compare, gluten to to gluten-free.
Yeah,
and there are some really amazing products out there. There are some companies doing amazing things. And so we need to be promoting what we love instead of bashing what we hate. And that, I think, us as consumers, that can make a difference even in the restaurant industry and the hospitality industry.
I love that too, because so I posted on Instagram and on my Thrive Facebook page, my mom made and she made it for my birthday, which was back in April, but she just made the King Arthur gluten-free yellow cake.
Yes.
And she announced multiple times to me and my dad the other night after she made it, she's like, I am going to continue to use this cake mix. I don't care what I'm making. This is so fluffy. She loves the thickness of the cake batter when she's making it. And she's like, I'm going to just use this all the time. And
I cannot say enough good things about King Arthur flour. I love their products. And one thing that we talk about too in celiac disease is we go back to that malnutrition issue. So many products on the market that are gluten-free are not fortified like regular gluten-based items. Like regular flour is fortified with B vitamins and niacin and iron. King Arthur flour is one of the few companies that fortifies their gluten-free flour.
Oh, wow, that's good to know. Yeah.
So I pretty much use them exclusively, except for when it comes to a yeasted product. I find cup for cup works better. Why, I don't know, but it just does, and so that's what I use. But and there are a lot. I just like King Arthur flour a lot. I have a lot of. It's interesting that you mentioned them, because I was supporting them last night after somebody was nasty to them on their social media, which was unwarranted. And I was like, remember, social media people, there's a person behind that computer answering your questions, and you're not talking to the CEO, you're talking to somebody that's their job. And they were just incredibly poised and professional with everybody that was critical of them. And I just can't say enough good things about them. I'm very impressed.
That's awesome. And that's owning it, and teaching what that means to be the company that you are, and the restaurants and food service professionals should do that. One of the things that you and I were talking about the other day, or I noticed on your post, because it was a Asian box of food or something, and the gluten-free label was only like this big. And the thing about the King Arthur gluten-free, I mean, the letters are like this big, and it's right across the front of the box. It's not hidden in the little corner or not just hidden in the ingredients. They're owning it, and they want everybody to know that they have it. And I think when we're talking about food safety, labeling your food so it's understandable and it's visual is super important.
Right. I know we talked privately when we talked the other day about the incident of the girl who died with the peanut allergy, when the cookies looked incredibly identical to the packaging did. And it's like you need to be aware of just how, sometimes you're that busy parent and you're just going to grab something. And Vans is the biggest. We talk about this all the time in the gluten-free world. Vans is a food producer, and their box for their gluten-free and their regular waffles look basically identical. Like the wording that says gluten-free is very small. So and it happens to so many people. They say, yep, it happened to me. I so many comments about vegans all the time. And so I don't buy from them, but wow. Yep.
And kind of going back to that cake and tasting good. I mean, there are not gluten-free foods, normal foods that don't taste good. So we don't hear bad-mouthing people bad-mouthing all of those all the time. But it reminds me of Erin McKenna, who in New York, baby cakes, because she really didn't for a long time promote that she was a vegan cupcake person or gluten-free because she was getting backlash from a lot of different people. And there's a lot of other companies, restaurants that do that too. And you got to be proud of what you're making. And if you're not proud, actually I was talking to Claire Gould. I don't know if she's listening or not, but she's like, because 2 weeks ago, Kathy Hester was talking about how she went to an event and she was given a sandwich, a gluten-free sandwich and gluten-free vegan sandwich that had one tomato and one slice of tomato and one piece of lettuce on it.
And that was it?
That was it, in between two pieces of gluten-free bread. And she's like, I wasn't complaining, but I went up to the meeting planner and I said, I want you to go back to the chef and say, I'm not paying for this.
Right, it's unacceptable.
Right. And so I was telling Claire that story and she's like, I would take that sandwich and I would find the chef and I would ask the chef to eat that sandwich. And say, if you won't eat it, then why are you giving it to other people?
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think about that because I went to, again, it's interesting, I find that it's my friends, maybe because they're younger, that sometimes understand my celiac disease needs better than sometimes older family members. And we have friends that live in our neighborhood and we were in part of their wedding and they made sure, it was just a regular hotel where their reception was at. I think it was a Holiday Inn or Comfort Inn. I don't remember what it was. And they made sure to come out and say, we are making a separate piece of chicken for you and plain rice and steamed broccoli. And this is how we're going to do it. And I will bring it to you directly. And I'm like, it's not that hard. I mean, right. It's very simple to accommodate. And I don't know if it was, I know I had seen you before, like talking to the chef that had helped with Disney, like try to make the menu as allergen free for everybody as possible. And it makes it easier on everybody. And it's, gluten-free, stuff tastes good,
Right.
So.
Well, and I've been to an event, I think it was in Chicago, and it was big buffets everywhere, but they had rice and they're like, not gluten-free. And I'm like, why is the rice not gluten-free? I mean, it's naturally gluten-free. What did you put in it? And why would you do that? And it not be labeled, and that frustrates me. One of the best practices that you wrote to me beforehand was that you love when restaurants use special plates for gluten-free meals or colored toothpicks. And there's a restaurant in Colorado that has brown toothpicks that say gluten-free on it or dairy-free. And there's one in Baltimore. Oh my gosh, I forgot the name of it, but they have stickers and they put the sticker on your plate before they hand it out.
Yep. And it's not hard to do. It's not hard to do at all. Yeah. And there are some places that they, it'll be like only the manager brings out the meal if there's a dietary restriction. So that way they can make sure they've communicated. That's another good step. And
with your training I should know this answer, but do you do a lot of training for the restaurants or more for the people living with the celiac?
More for people living with celiac. Like I have a post and it's live. It was live yesterday on my Facebook. Well, it's been live for a long time, but I promoted it on my Facebook page yesterday. Like, here's a list of questions to ask, broken down by like, oh, is this a pizza place? These are the questions you should ask if you're having pizza. Oh, you're having pasta? Think about these questions. Oh, you want French fries? Is a dedicated fryer? Like, oh, you're having breakfast? Like, these are the questions to think about. So I try to group them into like, situational areas of the questions you need to think about.
So that's the whole link that you sent me, but that at least gets you to part of it. So miglutenfreegal.com. Yep. And that's the thing is like, you have to, we rely on restaurants to understand. And this is one thing that I'm really pushed that, you and I as the diners, we have to understand that not all of those people understand it.
Right.
Right. and we were talking about the Michigan law about regulation. So can you tell people a little bit about that?
So I think the Michigan, I know that Ming Tsai was really instrumental in getting a food allergy restaurant law passed. That's Boston where he's at, right? I'm terrible memory. And so I think the Michigan law is kind of piggybacked off of the one that was passed there. So every Michigan restaurant by law is supposed to have at least one person who is serve safe allergen trained so that they know what the food allergies are, how to prevent cross contact, that sort of stuff. So I'll have to admit, it was passed a couple of years ago. And again, like, as you know, Tracy, my life's been a bit turned upside down since February. So my brain isn't all where it should be. So yeah. And there's a restaurant I remember talking to even before I think it was made a law in Ann Arbor. He's like, why wouldn't I train all of my staff? Like, if it's going to keep the customer the safest, why wouldn't I pay to train everybody? Which is exactly the kind of attitude I want to see from a restaurant owner. Because I think too, like, you know, people will say, oh, this restaurant made me sick or whatever. And I have a post about this on my website too, about like, if something goes wrong, yes, you're upset, but think about the best way to handle it that's going to cause the positive change that you want. Like, if you're just going to smear them all over social media and not take the time to contact them directly and say, hey, this is what happened. Like, how can you make it better next time?
Yep.
You know, that's just being angry all the time on social media is not going to bring about it's not going to fix the problem at that location. Plus, it's going to make other restaurant owners be like, oh, they just complain all the time. You know, I don't want to deal with them. And I'm like, so whether it seems unfair about whether we should be the nice person because we were the ones that were wronged, and I get that, we have to think of the bigger picture.
Exactly.
And, you know,
Yeah, there's a restaurant downtown that here in New Bern that was doing French toast kits. And I wanted to know if the batter was gluten free, because I can go get my own bread at the grocery store. And I called up and the girls that answered the phone didn't know. And I know the restaurant owner. So I just said, you know, the people who are answering the phone or taking orders should know what is gluten free and if the batter is gluten free or not. And she's like,
exactly.
Yeah.
And, you know, every person needs to know, because in that moment, that person answering the phone is the restaurant.
Right.
When I did training when we had our gluten free camp in the Grand Rapids area, that's what I did. I did a training with all the counselors that were watching over the kids. And I said, you need to remember that in that moment, the child coming to camp, you as the counselor are the YMCA, because it was at a YMCA camp. And I'm like, even though you're not the boss, in that moment to that child, you represent the YMCA. So the same thing for any wait staff at any restaurant or at any event center. Like, in that moment, you are the company. And if you provide a bad service, they're not going to be just mad at you. They're going to be mad at the whole company. So you need to understand that you're a part of a team, and you should have a boss that trains you.
Right.
To be able to best represent. So, I mean, it's not just on the waiter or wait staff, whether they know the things well. It's on the owner to make sure they have trained their staff to give their customers the best possible experience.
And that starts from, I don't know if we
top
just
down.
From the top down, but it also starts from the first communication, which is the website too.
Yes.
And putting that information on the website so it's legible, it's clear, and not down at the bottom. And and actually at one point I was doing this too myself, but gluten friendly versus gluten free, you know, and that it needs to say gluten free, because if you're not comfortable with that, say it's free of gluten, which is a lot more words, but gluten friendly doesn't do crap.
Right. And I've actually talked to owners. I've actually talked to 2 owners that wanted to use that term, and I explained in depth, like, this is why you don't. And I even, you know.
All right, explain it right now.
What?
Go ahead and explain it right now.
So when gluten friendly, well, first of all, when we say gluten friendly, that sounds like you're friendly to gluten, which is the exact opposite of what I want. And usually most time when a business says gluten friendly, that means they're not using a dedicated fryer. They're not taking protocols to reduce cross contact. That's what that term says to me, that gluten friendly is for people who are choosing to eat gluten free, not who need to eat gluten free. That's what it says to me. And so, and when I did talk to, this is quite a while ago, but I did a Facebook post asking my followers, when you see that term, what do you think? And so then I saved that link, on my Google Drive, and it said, anytime a business says they want to use it, I'm like, go read this post, go read all these comments and see what it means to somebody with celiac disease when they see that term, because they're not going to eat at your establishment. They're
Right.
just not. So, yeah, gluten friendly is like the bane of my existence. But I'm going to go back to the website. I think that's interesting that you said that, and I won't name the business because I'm not here to slam them per se. But there's a place. It's supposed to be a family getaway center. It's in one of the water park places. Uh-huh. And they are supposed to be known for being, they were reviewed in Allergy Eats and being like the gold standard, like Disney. And there was nothing on their website about any of what they have. They even had gluten-free options, even though I knew in this other place. And I had tried to say to them, I do restaurant interviews so that way my followers can see, can I have a comp day to come show everybody all that you have to offer?
Right.
You don't have enough followers for you to work with us. I was like, what? And that next weekend, I talked to someone in our support group that was considered going to this place and said, oh, I didn't even know they had gluten-free options. I searched their website and couldn't find it. So no kidding, like within the same week when they said, oh, your following isn't big enough for us to work with you, I was like, you missed an opportunity for basically free advertising.
Right.
So there's a MSU has a new station called Thrive, a new dining hall called Thrive, which is top 8 allergen free. And they come to my meal, which is, it's college cafeteria food. It's not that expensive, but I already had a working relationship with the dietitian. And, that post was seen by like 30, 40,000 people because people were excited and they shared it. So if there's a restaurant out there thinking they want to work with somebody, like you need to realize that we network with each other, just like you, like if you have experiences, you have people you talk to, and when experiences don't go well, you still talk, so we have connections, and you need to figure out how we reach those people, and we're a part of that.
And that network of the food allergy, the celiac, they cross-pollinate and they share. And with 32 million Americans with food allergies and 1 in every 133 with celiac disease, they're talking to people. And we're not eating out by ourselves all the time. So we're bringing extra people. So definitely wanting to know.
And that's such a good point, because that's such an excellent point. Like, when restaurants and events refuse to accommodate those with dietary restrictions, they're not just missing out on me, they're missing out on the people I would have brought with me to eat with them. So it's really in their best interest to pay attention.
Yeah. So on Sunday was Celiac Awareness Day, which I totally missed. But anything that came out of that would be great that's around food safety, or that we should talk about? I know that's very open-ended conversation.
Yeah. It was also my birthday. So I'm like, usually I'm better about promoting awareness, but this year I'm like, dude, I'm going to just eat my cake and be with my friends and chill out.
And your cake that you had was awesome.
It was. That got a lot of shares too. People were like, that's the most amazing cake I've ever seen. So yeah. And my friends who don't have to eat gluten-free enjoyed it as well. So there's, again, proof that it tastes good. I think the biggest thing about celiac disease awareness is there are just so many people undiagnosed.
Yes.
So it's one thing to, accommodate us that do know we have it, but there's so many people that don't know they have it. And again, like, it's a struggle because there's like this stigma about, oh, gluten-free tastes terrible, or, gluten-free people are difficult. We need to kind of get rid of that stigma, and especially too, because, one of the majority major symptoms of celiac disease is bowel issues. So nobody really, most people don't really want to talk about that. I mean, I'm willing to talk about it anytime, but we just have to make people understand that it's not this diagnosis is not the end of life. It's actually the beginning of life, because you will feel better again. You will have restored energy. Your hair will come back. You know, yes, we have to remove something from our diet, but we get so much in return.
That's so phenomenal way to put it, because if you think about it, I mean, it's just wheat, rye, and barley, and you're removing that from your diet. And granted, it's very hard to do because there are multiple terms for wheat. They're, not really barley and rye, but and let's talk about malt real quick. And then malt is barley.
Yes, malt is barley. So it is, okay, this is part my understanding is it's hydrolyzed barley, which is a whole way of making something, which is why it's difficult to test for. And again, like I always tell people, if you're not following Gluten Free Watchdog, you need to, because she's awesome. And Trisha's one of my favorite people in the world. So I find that malt is like one of these sneaky things that people don't realize, that it contains gluten. Like, I'm still surprised. People will eat Kellogg's Rice Krispies. I'm like, wait a minute, that has barley in it. She's like, oh, but it has malt in it. Well, it didn't say barley. I'm like, but malt is from barley. Like, just surprised number of people who don't know, and you just have to keep patiently telling the same thing over and over, because there are just going to be those people who fall through the cracks. And and the FALCPA, or Food Allergy Labeling Protection Consumers Act, whatever that is. So wheat is required to be labeled, but rye and barley are not.
Right.
And rye, like, I feel like rye is pretty obvious. It's only used pretty much in bread. It's not used in flavorings. It's not a sneaky ingredient, but barley is, man. And we really need to look at getting that changed and getting barley added to that, because it's not in bold letters sometimes like wheat is. People just don't notice it and they skip over it. Right. There's actually a post I have on my website about somebody mistaking the 100-gram candy bars were gluten-free because they tested it with something and it came back with a smiley face. I'm like, but that device doesn't test for malt. It's not, so it's not going to show you the right thing. And then the parents that had fed their kids that candy because the one person said it. And I'm like, oh, people, you got to read the labels every time, especially just in general, because ingredients change. But yeah, malt. So the FDA kind of recently, in the past couple weeks, kind of refined gluten-free labeling in terms of hydrolyzed and fermented foods. Which, go read Gluten Free Watchdog. She can explain it better than I can. But just to say, gluten-reduced beer is not gluten-free. Please don't drink it.
Yeah, and that's where it gets really tough, because people are using back in the 80s, the food manufacturers won a lawsuit that says they could do anything on the front of the box or the front of the packaging to promote their product. Like low sugar or whatever. Right. The only place that they have to 100% be truthful is the nutrition box on the side or the back of it. And so they may say it's gluten friendly or whatever, but that's kind of a little bit deceptive in that same way. You have to read that white label constantly all the time. Manufacturers, as Margaret just said, change their recipes. They don't necessarily tell you. And so it's imperative that we read. And actually, when you're in an event or at a restaurant, you communicate and you share the labels and pay attention to what you're communicating out.
And I think it's important to also note, so while the FDA has guidelines that something that's gluten-free must contain under 20 parts per million of gluten, companies are not required to test their product to verify that it is before putting a gluten-free label on their packaging. So we could still I know, it's insane. So the only recourse we have is if we think we've gotten sick from something, we can then complain to the FDA, and then they are supposed to go after that company and investigate. So I've even had, people that have worked for large manufacturers not understand this, that, you really need to be testing to make sure it's under 20 parts per million. And that's why where some of these gluten-free certification organizations are helpful, like GIG and Beyond Celiac, and NSA and NSF. Like they have a process and they can explain that process so you can learn more about it. But they all test under 20 parts per million. But yeah, I try to tell people that like just because you see something that says gluten free, and I think this is important in the realm of oats too, because oats are a sticky issue, and they are highly contacted with wheat, and it's often in there, and they often test high above 20 parts per million. So if you see something with oats, you need to ask, are they using oats that tested under 20 parts per million, or are they just using the assumption that all oats are gluten free?
Right. Yeah. And oats is a big thing that we serve at events, you know, on continental breakfast and things like that. And so it's really important to say, hey, please use certified gluten-free oats.
Yes.
And that's the black circle with the GF in it.
They just changed their logo actually.
So now,
yeah. So now it kind of looks like a G with intestines in my opinion. Yeah, so GFCO just changed their logo, and they changed the logo for their training for restaurants as well. So before it was that GF circle logo, and now it looks completely different, and it's got like a G with a green triangle, and yeah.
Oh,
I know somebody that said, man, I hope they didn't pay their graphic designer a lot of money. But it's just I'm not here to slam them. It's just going to be a learning process. The labels and certification logos we've come to know and trust have changed. So we really need to be aware of what we're looking at.
Oh my gosh, that's so important. And one little final story is that even on your banquet event orders for an event, like my friend Christina sent me a BEO that said gluten-free salad. And when salad came out, it was in an ice cream cone. And so the banquet.
What was a salad in an ice cream cone?
It was a cool display. It's a, display, having fun with it, which we won't be seeing that much lately or anytime soon. But the cone wasn't gluten-free. And the food and beverage person there is like, well, the salad's gluten-free.
Oh.
But going back and reading the BEO even a year later, I noticed that it actually said that it also had the Chinese noodles on it, which are not gluten-free. And so how did the chef who put it on there not catch the fact that he's promoting a gluten-free salad and looking about the utensils? So you were talking about gloves and aprons and things like that, but it's also the serving vessels. We have to think.
I think one of the ones I think of all the time is one that my friend Erica from Celiac and the Disease brings up. Like they'll have bacon and then they'll put bread put regular bread underneath the bacon to soak it up. I'm like, well, it's not gluten-free anymore. Even though they put a gluten-free sign, I'm like, but there's regular bread there. Like you've totally, and she has seen it time and time and time again. I'm like, how don't restaurants, don't hotels learn? Don't they talk to each other? Like,
no, apparently not.
Apparently not.
Yeah. I actually saw that at a hotel in Atlanta at a conference I was working, and we had a guy highly allergic to wheat, and we walked through the buffet and there's bread underneath there, and it's to soak up the grease, which I get, but use a gluten-free bread, right? Okay. So my final question for you is, what is your favorite food and your favorite beverage?
So that's hard to say because I like lots of food. Lots of food. Probably especially in talking in regards to gluten-free, like I love French fries that are cooked in a dedicated gluten-free fryer, which means the restaurant and the hotel place gets it. Favorite beverage, I drink mostly water at home. I drink a lot of milk. If I'm going to have an alcoholic beverage, because again, gluten-reduced beer is not gluten-free, I'm a hard cider fan, and I always give a shameless plug for the local organic cider mill that's in our neighborhood. And he's a fascinating guy. It's called JK's Farmhouse Ciders. He ships them nationwide.
Oh, wow.
They're on the sweet side. If you like dry, this is not the hard cider for you. They're definitely on the sweet side, but it's all organic, and the people there are just wonderful. I feel I got to do an interview with him, and I got to hop in his car and drive through the orchard, and they showed me the science of grafting plants together. And I was like talking to Johnny Appleseed. He's just a phenomenal guy.
That's awesome. So, very cool. Well, thank you, Margaret Clegg from MI Gluten Free Gal. And I've posted her website and her social media on here. Make sure that everybody connects with her and follows her on social media. She's got great information. Margaret, thank you for what you do.
Oh, you're welcome. And I hope I was a good interviewer. I ramble sometimes. So.
I ramble sometimes too. No, you're great. I really appreciate the information that you have and what you share on a daily basis. So until next time, this is Tracy Stuckroth with Thrive Meetings and Events and Eating at a Meeting podcast. Thanks.
You're welcome. Talk to you later.
Okay.